going to go all in. I'm going to do this with every ounce.
So what's up, YouTube? I hope you guys are good. So yeah, my name is Jabulani Mandla Nhlapo. Yeah. I usually have this craving to try and go off, right? But I don't know it. Like, I don't know it in full. But it's something I'm gonna do. It's something I'm gonna actually accomplish. Now the thing is, the only person in my family, right, distant family, close families, who actually knows it is this aunt of my father. I think she's, yeah, no, I don't think. She still lives in Bethlehem, right? She still lives in Bethlehem. She's the only one I've heard recite Kahle properly during my father's funeral, 2017. R.I.P. Babus Gegete. So yeah, so I'm planning on like visiting Bethlehem and then like visiting them and then, you know, going on just to take the information and the history and whatnot. So yeah, this is your boy. I don't know if I'm in second year or third year, but something like that. I'm in third year, I have modules from second year and whatnot. So yeah, I'm a third year with modules from second year, student from the UFS. I know that's embarrassing to kind of say, but the truth is the truth, you know, you can't lie to yourself. So yeah, man, I'm a BSOC student. I was formerly a BA student, but because of I wanted to rearrange my majors, right? My majors were psychology and art history, within politics as an elective. I didn't want to do it that way. So I had to change it. I wanted to be politics and psychology and then have art history as an elective. So when I did that, I actually changed this year. I changed from doing BA to BSOC. Still, you know, similar modules. So yeah, BSOC, I'm a student in BSOC. Yeah. I think that's interesting about me. So at the University of the Free State. So, you know, I posted a video on my channel last time, really. I think the last video I posted, I was in the art gallery, right? Stellenbosch Art Gallery here on campus. The beautiful art gallery, it's a nice art gallery. I literally got exposed to it because I was an art history student, you know. Someone's like, what is art history? What do you guys study in art history? Art history is basically just us studying the historical movements of art, you know, from the BBC ages, you know, when we were hunter gatherers. I think, yeah. So we study from that up until contemporary art, right? So from there to Roman, to Greek, antiquity, to the Renaissance. That's my favorite period, to the Renaissance, to things like Rococo, you know, Dadaism, all the isms, you know, and the different types of art movement. So they actually showed me a lot. I learned a lot about the importance of art in a society, art in a culture, and how art actually influences what we now know and call pop culture. But even if we don't call pop culture, art has always influenced and has always contributed to shifts in society. Because you look at the times of the Enlightenment, you know, during the French Revolution, especially European wise, right? Because of it's usually what mostly influences how the global art movement or the global discourse. So during the Enlightenment period, you know, art was there. You know, during the Renaissance, art was actually helping people or European out of the dark ages of Europe. You know, remember Europe used to be in the dark ages and Africa was thriving it then, but art was part of the knowledge acquisition for the Europeans, and it also helped them change themselves because of through the paintings that were done by the likes of Michelangelo and, you know, Donatello, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael and stuff. They were, you know, let's start there. Why I like the Renaissance. The Renaissance was more or less similar to the Greeks in terms of they were actually discovering what the Greeks have learned and the Romans, right? And we know those two generations actually learned from Africa. We know that, I don't know if it's Plato or Aristotle, but the first one, most of them they learned in Egypt from the likes of Imhotep, right? That's where they learned anatomy, math, you know, a lot of these things. So during the Renaissance, Europe was coming out of this dark age where there was no new information produced and whatnot. and they were just living barbarically. So they were discovering this, and they were reinterpreting art, right, according to the antiquities, right, which is art. I think I'm just gonna butcher it. During the Greek era, there was two types of art. There was art for the higher class, and then there was art for like the middle classes, right? During those antiquities, I'm looking for the cities. I'm looking for the cities that we usually use to distinguish those two types of art movements. But in one of the, I think it's the higher classes, the higher societies of Greeks, they used art as something to actually show what the logos is, what the God, like the heavenly and whatnot. So through art, you were given a glimpse of heaven, of this internal beauty, you know, of this construct of beauty. So during the Renaissance, they were discovering such measures, but then they went a bit further, because of during that time, either art was in the Greek antiquities, either art was used for the logos, which is religious purposes, and also to magnify like your emperors, your rulers and whatnot, to show and bestow them, right? So during the Renaissance, they actually expanded on that by introducing a new way of actually interpreting art, for the sense of just art being itself. Like art was just art, and art was meant to be observed, to be intaked. I don't know if it's intaked or intook, something like that, comrade. You realize, you know, you were meant to observe art and for its beauty, you know. Trust me, it still had like a lot of politics in it, religious connotations to it. Like you look at like, okay, I think it was Raphael, the birth of Mary or something like that, the birth of Venus. It still had a lot of religious implementations on it, but it was mostly emphasizing beauty. It was mostly emphasizing how a culture should, that's what I wanted to come to, hold themselves, right? We need to hold ourselves in an respectful manner. We need to behave in a beautiful manner. We need to push towards beauty, right, in our families, in how we conduct ourselves, etc., etc. So that's why I love the Renaissance. And it was also where the artists were recognized. It's a period where the artists were recognized. I'm just doing this randomly, right? I might come to it back, you know, in the future videos where I do a proper dissection of the Renaissance. This I'm just puking it. So the artists were coming to the fore because of people were actually celebrating them for their talent, for their hard work, for their craft, mastery of the skill, mastery of the pencil. Before that, an artist was just seen as someone who was being used by the gods, you know, higher spirits, to convey a message through you. You know, the same way we interpret worshippers in the church, or preachers in the church, it was usually like that. So the Renaissance, they were like, no, artists are great because of this. It's a great amount of skill that they're putting into this work. So we need to recognize them, and we also need to recognize what they intended to say to us, what's the message that they intended to convey to us. Now, through those habits, the Renaissance actually shaped Europe into what it is now. You know, it led to the rise of the Enlightenment, where there was a huge cry and a huge look for knowledge acquisition, right, which ended up changing Europe, moving them from at the bottom of the barrel to the top of civilization. You know, that's when they actually developed an ego to feel like they're the superior race. Remember, for the most of the time, Europeans didn't see each other as just white people. They actually just saw each other as city-states enemies. They were always fighting. Dude. Even if you look at all the world wars, it was usually wars of the West, Europe, countries fighting. So they were so powerful that we call them world wars, or because of one player from East Asia joined and another from the West, and then suddenly it was world war, and Africa was engulfed in it, like, and you know, your Northern American countries. Like, dude, we are not part of that. It is a European war, but branded as world war. So most of them, they were not really seeing each other as one. But then after the Enlightenment, 17th century, you know, when Britain, when they started to voyage, you know, go out there, that's when they started to, you know, we are white, we are superior and whatnot. So yeah, why I touched on that is because of this channel. I want it to be a combination of my interest, right? What are my interests? I'll just simplify them with my majors, right, which is psychology and politics, and then the elective that I had to drop. Sadly, if it was possible, I would have been a triple major in my final year. So yeah, sadly. So it's politics, it's psychology, and it's art history. Alright, I feel like they somehow summarize myself. Cool. So this channel, I wanted to touch on those topics. Let's start at politics. politics is all about social change, right? If we define politics in its basic terms, it's basically who gets what, when, why, and where, right? Who gets which resources? Why are they getting those resources? How much of those resources are they getting? And when are they getting them and why? If you can go down deeper, you can be like, okay, who gets who gets to be on the social systems of their countries, like who gets to have SASSA, who gets to get SASSA, who gets to get NSFAS. Why? Okay, no, they fall under this bracket, they cannot afford to pay fees and whatnot. Okay, cool, 1 2 3 4 5. So that's politics, right? Which is involved with the social aspects of human beings, because we know that human beings, we are individual animals, but we are also part of social structures, right? Social structures. So that's it's a huge part of my life, because of ever since high school, when I started debating, that's where I started to see this social construct of life, right? I used to hear about apartheid, I used to hear about racism, the likes of Steve Biko, Mandela, and whatnot. But that's when it hit me individually, and that's when I started going down deep rabbit holes. I think it's the same as being born again, right? You can be born into a household where both of your parents are attending church, but then it comes a time where you as a person, individually, you have to accept Jesus Christ, like as your Lord and Savior. Even if you're a son of a pastor, daughter of a pastor, there comes a time where you have to take the conscious decision of saying, I'm going to take the cross and I'm going to follow him. So I think it was the same thing for me. I've been under this wave of information, here and there. Every year we were celebrating, not so long ago we were celebrating Freedom Day, right? But then personally, I wasn't really interested and invested, which is the problem that we still have with a lot of young people, and it's one of the problems that I want to address with my channel, right? Making such information and knowledge, giving it to you guys on your fingertips, on your phones, and then also trying and making it interesting for you guys to consume. Cool, fine. And so yeah, why are we as black people at the bottom of the barrel? What happened? What brought us there? Why are we still there? What happened to our psyche that we are still kept there? Because I think Steve Biko once said that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. We may have the democratic freedom, we may have a little bit of economic freedom, but I feel like in terms of mind-wise, mindsets, mentally, our minds are still at the hands of the oppressors, right? So cool. Another aspect of my life is psychology. I'm interested in psychology. I've always been. But I remember growing up, at some point, my sister was the one who was actually into psychology. But then when I took majors, around about 2019, I wanted to take a major that would go with politics. So surprisingly, my English wasn't that good for me to major in politics and philosophy. So the second best thing on the table was psychology. It's like, let me go and learn about the human psyche. First things first, so it was in the higher certificate program of the UFS, which was in Vista. So introduction to psychology, the module was nice. And then I came across beautiful concepts like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So at the top there was something called self-actualization. I was like, what? What is self-actualization? Why is it at the top, Because it's hierarchy of needs, from food, shelter, belonging, finding your purpose, your future. Then at the top, there's something called self-actualization. So I started looking into it, and I was like, okay, what's that? What's happening with that? And then it interested me. Now, remember, psychology is nice because you get to diagnose people, you get to diagnose yourself, because of your learning of what causes stress, what stress looks like, what depression, 1 2 3. I didn't like that kind of psychology. I like the psychology that empowers us as human beings. And I think I learned about that in breadth or in full when I started being exposed to Jordan Peterson, right? I was exposed to Jordan Peterson as a feminist. I just saw this video of him, and then it had a title that I think it was his interview with Kathy Newman, or that sister from from Britain, the British interview. So what happened was, I was curious, who's this guy who's destroying feminists? He must be found, must be destroyed. So I went on to listen to the interview, and I realized, okay, the guy isn't as bad as he's made out to be. I left it. A while later, came back to him, and then I started being a Jordan fan, and I started going down his rabbit hole, and then I listened to, I think, 2 or 3 of his podcasts from Joe Rogan. Before this recent one, they just did like days ago, And then he mentioned a concept that really touched me. How can you try and fix the world if you haven't fixed your room, right? And then he was like, first things first, clean your room. Clean your room, clean your life, fix your life. And then you can go out to try and save the world and clean the world. I was like, that's beautiful, that's powerful, you know. So I started being exposed to psychology that talks about our potential as human beings versus just being victims. So yeah, from there I didn't stop, kept on going down psychology. And then another pillar for myself is art history, as I've explained, you know. From art history, I learned the power of art, you know, and from now I can say the power of pop culture, right? How it shapes societies, how it influences societies, how it breaks societies, how it can build societies. I even saw an interview, I think it was, I forgot the intellectual. It was an interesting view. He was making the case that hip hop is actually one of the causes for the destruction of the African Americans, right? And then he's like, look at it, from slavery up until mid 70s to now, black households had both parents. It was a mother, father, and kids inside, right? But then from the middle 70s upwards, that started to deteriorate. That's why right now African Americans have a high single parented household, right? The dad is not always there. So we can blame racism, we can blame systematic racism, but then he makes the case that hip hop, I think hip hop, was invented. I don't know, is invented the right word? But yeah, it was invented around as a genre, as a music genre, around 1970s. I think 74, 75. You guys will correct me in the comments. So he makes that argument that, and if you listen, okay, this the beginning of hip hop. It was all about black culture, pushing black people, the liberation, Black Panther, and then came the likes of even the likes of Nas, right? Then there came the likes of Tupac, who was mixing both messages. But then he started to lean more into the gangster rap, I fucked your bitch, Biggie, I got money, West Coast, mother, and then that's the popular side of the popular type of hip hop that got to the mainstreams, right? Which was speaking about gun violence, promiscuity, sleeping with a lot of women, denigration of women in the black society. I know it's hard to swallow, but it's a pill. It's there. Swallow it. We'll bring you the water. So he makes that argument that, hip-hop has a huge influence on black people, societies, black families. So because of its prominence, its mainstream, it going to mainstream, it's one of the reasons why black families erupted. Because of most of the young males who were coming up were listening to what? Hip-hop. And they wanted to live like their idols. They wanted to live like their role models. The likes of Tupac, Biggie, a lot of women around me. Even though Tupac was still spitting some good message, but he was going about it the wrong way, man. If you've watched the movie, there was a point where his mother was telling him, they're going to give you the tools to destroy yourself. So, in as much as they gave him the tools to destroy himself, he also somehow, we can say, they gave us the tools to destroy ourselves as black people, because of the music that you listen to influences how you see the world, right? That's where psychology comes in. The content that you consume somehow comes back out as a perspective of the world. That's how you view the world, right? Human beings are information adapting animals. We are always taking in information. We are always trying to make sense of the world out there. We're always trying to piece out everything. So hip hop taught us that. Hip hop taught us that, you are you're the G if you have a lot of hands. If I'm such a G, I could take your girl. Such a G, I could sleep with your girl and you wouldn't know it, right? So that was the culture that went on, people trying to be G's, women also adapted, they were also listening to this. There were some female rappers, EVE, who were coming out. Who's this other one? I'm thinking of the chubby sister, I forgot her. So the culture actually corroded black culture. So he was talking about that. So it showed me the power of pop culture. It showed me the power of art. And then I'm someone who's also a big follower of Virgil Abloh, so I learned through him that art plays a huge role. Art plays a significant role in our lives, dictating what we eat, what we wear, how we wear. You know what I'm saying? If you have a beanie like this, if you have a weird, or that one with the cross, you know what I'm saying? If you're dressing a certain way, ole 18 moyeni yabona ole botswa. If you're listening to house music and you dress a certain way, we come from an era of Buskotani, right? Hoza Madonna, Hoza Madonna, Hoza, and people were dressing Buskotani way. So he shows like popular culture has that, photography, movies, you know, relationship wise, fidelities are because of movies, right? Movies have so much sex in it, and if you look at it closely, they're usually hot sex scenes in an infidelity context. Either the wife is cheating on the husband or the husband is cheating on the wife. Nowadays, lately, they love making us cheat because of hey feminism, but I feel like it's just because of it gets more views, right? What usually aggravates the people gravitate towards to watch more of it. So the more movies you release of women cheating, and it makes men livid, so they want to click and watch. Yes, these are women. And then on the other side, women are like, yes girl, supposed to do it, like that's how we're supposed to do it. Men have been doing it, why not? So it's one of those squabbles. So pop culture does influence us. So this channel, I wanted to address those things, those pillars. In other videos, I'll be addressing them independently. Like maybe we'll be concentrating on art, like I'm saying. Maybe we'll be talking about the Renaissance, you know, how we are now in the African Renaissance, how we can position art, you know, pop culture, psychology, politics in this African Renaissance. Or it will be about strictly politics. Maybe we'll be dissecting what is communism, right? What is socialism, what is capitalism, what is feminism, what is another ism, what is realism, right? And how do they relate to you as a South African, as an African, as a global person, as a global citizen? So we were doing all of that. So yeah, man, make sure to like, subscribe, comment on this video, you know, what you want more to see, you know, maybe the political ideologies you'd like for me to actually address, you know, art questions, art topics, you know, psychological things. But then psychology would be more about empowering us, not really like, okay, wow, mental health, I'm so down. Like, big ups to all the people who are battling with mental health. We love you guys. We are here for you. I think all of us are battling with mental health. It's just the degree of it. So, but then we won't be mostly focusing on what's wrong with us. Rather, I'll be trying to focus more on what we can do to empower ourselves and how strong and actually capable and powerful we are as human individuals, right? So yeah, like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. You can turn on the notifications, you know. See you next time.